Hey, Mike here, one of the Tribe guys, and today in this video, I'm going to show you the Tribe brand identity framework that we've used with several companies that have gone on to do millions of dollars. So this is our seven-figure messaging formula, because if the messaging is wrong, content's going to be hard, ads don't work, there's just no correlation, and you end up just burning time and money. So this is what we're going to go through today. Boom, a little bit of overview on these six pieces. So I'm going to talk about the $13,000 lesson that we learned in building this, the 7 years it took to go through that, and then we're going to get into about 20 minutes of straight facts behind all of the pieces here. Because when you have all six pieces in place, then your messaging is tight and everything else becomes easy. So let's dive in. We are talking about messaging, and it is debatably our favorite topic, just because it's been probably our biggest pain point so far in digital marketing and in business in general. So, as we talked about, maybe you've seen the stories, maybe you read the email, on the way in here. But yeah, messaging was one of those things that like we kind of chalked it into branding, or maybe like branding was the thing that we just kind of always bypassed because it always seemed like this, it's colors, it's fonts, it's the things that, debatably don't even matter, especially as they talk about how it's the ugly funnels that seem to do the best. And so for years, then we would just be taking on clients and more or less getting a percentage of revenue, right? Just testing marketing campaigns. That was kind of part of our dream growing up is, we just had all these ideas. We love being creative, but, whose credit card can we use? Whose company can we use to test all these things, from video sales letters to, like webinars, to just all the ways to get people into a thing, right? We've worked with so many coaches and so many great coaches, and it just was so frustrating that it seemed like the people with the best products were just not getting results because of their messaging. Just let me just, cats are so thirsty. And so it really put us on a mission. Like we were 27 when we got dropped by one of our biggest clients. And it was like 7 years of working together. And he's like, I think I'm just going to try internal marketing. We're like, cool, cool, cool. Okay. So no predictable revenue moving forward. And we just always had one foot on the gas because we needed money. And we always had one foot on the brakes because we had no certainty, right? Certainty and clarity was that thing through like all of our 20s that was just so frustrating every day, just uncertain of what to do and if it will work. And there was just no system to follow, no process. And so when we were 27, then we had a few K left in the bank. We had a few K left on a credit card. And we hired the king of ClickFunnels, right? Because we knew growing up, we knew since ClickFunnels really came out, we were like 22, 23. We just knew if we had a 2 Comma Club award, we figured something out. And so it was our mission. We didn't know how, we didn't really care how, we just knew that if we just kept following digital marketing, if we kept following the passion, if we kept following the money and the systems, if we can get to a 2 Comma Club award, like we wouldn't teach anything. Even as we started to have wins, we're like, we're not going to teach anything until we have the 2 Comma Club award, because for us, that was validation, that was certainty. And we didn't want to be one of those coaching coaches without, a system in place. And, it's kind of a shitty industry that way. But yeah, so we hired the king of ClickFunnels, and we were just super excited to get on that first call. I remember it was like the dead of winter, and we were just amped to finally have something, just a system that we could borrow and just use with clients. And so we got on the phone. We're like, okay, so you've done it 8 times. You've got 8 of these 2 Comma Club awards, which is not behind me right now, but he's had 8 of those awards. And so we're like, okay, so what is the difference between the ones who make it, the ones who make $1 million, and then the ones who don't, the ones who just can't get clicks, can't get results, their ads don't work, right? And he's like, well, bro, it really comes down to the people who hire me. Like, we just build the webinar funnels, like basically telling us that we have to learn messaging because he didn't have it. And it was so frustrating because literally had no money, uncertainty, and clients at this point, trying to make rent the next month. And it just felt like we were behind the start line at this point. And so that really set us on a journey, and we started living cheap in Mexican hostels. A lot of fun, a lot of stress, but we would just start studying all of the greats. Like, first, all the cult brands, right? Like Jeep. Why do they have this like cult-like
loyalty? Why do they have like rituals and they have like everything is just so dialed in and special versus like Toyota? Like, what does that mean? What does that stand for? Right? Like Ben and Jerry's. Why does that ice cream like mean something to somebody, whereas Nestle doesn't, right? And so we just kept looking at the cult brands, but they're like they have billion-dollar budgets, right? They can hire the best, they can test everything. But what about the little guys, right? And so then we started looking at, cults and movements and human psychology. Like, really, why do people buy something? How do people make decisions? Like what is going on in the brain when people are creating preference or like looking at buying something or saying no to buying something, or like we just wanted to stop being better marketers because marketing just felt like a race to the bottom. It was like whoever can outspend the competition. But really we were like, you know, there's companies like Nerdy Nuts that we worked with. They're like, we haven't done any paid advertising, and they're multi-millions now per year in handmade peanut butter, right? So like, there's companies that are crushing it without ads, and so it's like, well, what is the difference here? And so after studying for like 7 years, we just built up all of these principles and just started testing with client. It would be like 6 months of working together and still not sure really like when we were done or like what the outcome was. And so it was like years of kind of like building it up. And then it was a few more years of chunking it down and trying to make it into like a tight system that now in an afternoon, we can do what used to take us months. Like we used to charge 3K in a day to do live. Now sometimes we can pull out in 2 hours, right? And so the systems really make it easy. Also the repetitions. And so I want to share with you today exactly what that framework looks like, because when that is tight, then everything else falls into place, right? Like when the message is unclear, they say the confused mind doesn't buy, right? And so when the message is tight and you can feel that it's tight, right? Every piece of it just aligns with the next, then you know that you have this foundation to build on, right? Then we can create the products, then we create the sales page, then we create the ads, then we create lead magnets, then content becomes easy because it's all just a spin-off of these 6 pieces and how they work together. So that's what I want to go through today. I'm going to share with you. We're going to kind of go through it together. So this is my first time using this Zoom whiteboard. So let's see how this goes. I imagine the drawing is not going to be great with my fingers on a trackpad, but let's see what we do. Highlighter or pen? Let's try pen. Let's try pen. Okay, so this is waiting for followers. I don't know if that matters. Probably not. Okay, so the first one, bit of the leg, circles are hard. Okay, that means I can't. Okay, so the first one is this circle right here. So maybe it helps if I draw kind of both together. Most brands that we were looking at, most coaches, most people who just kind of go about marketing, they're like, okay, this is me. And then this is, say, them / you. We. Okay. Boom. Not the best. But you can see it's very much like this is what we notice in fitness. There's a lot of these me brands. And so they're really just looking about what is that credibility? How do I make myself bigger? How do I be like charismatic and huge and like, very Hormozy on camera? Because that's what I need to do. That's who I need to be. Right. And then they're like, well, okay, I should definitely know my niche because like, who am I talking to? And so they're like, okay, define these things, problems, pain points, right? Very key, but also very kind of like disconnected. And then we talked about the Me Too brands. So we noticed that a lot with people who are selling products, e-com, a lot of Amazon businesses is very much like, oh, this is a hot trend. I want to make money with it. So then they'll just spit up products and a landing page. And a lot of it just becomes product pushing just to make money, which can be addictive. It can be fun, but it's really not sustainable. It's not a great business model. You're starting over almost every day. You make a sale, it gets sent out, and then you kind of have to restart. It doesn't feel like there's any longevity with it. You're just trying to double down on this sales cycle. And so we're really looking at what the difference was not building something for you, not building something for them, but really finding that sweet spot of who are we together? Well, worst circle yet. But it's that who are we together? It's where do these lanes touch, right? And so on the me side, it's very much about like marketing should be easy because it should be, well, who was I 5 years ago before I had this problem, right? And if you don't have that, then either make it up, or you're probably not ready for a tribe brand. But even still, like my boy Jay Zen, he's on this, zero to $12,000 a month mission. And so he has his method of how he's going to do it, but very AI and the new tools and opportunities. But he can build an audience because it's other people who want to use the same modality to create the same goal. And so if you don't have it, then you can just start to build a community of people who want the same thing versus who want what you've created. But most people, most coaches will already have gone through this crazy HJ, right? This hero journey. So there was, some kind of inciting incident that happened in your life. Like for us, getting dropped by a client, having to spend $13,000 on a coach who didn't give us anything, trying to find these answers, and then spending 7 years having to study call movements, human psychology, and testing with coaches over the next 7 years, building up a few membership sites, and then stripping it down to a model that we now have, right? Like just on the messaging side, we have a hero journey story. Then we can talk about the product side. We can talk about community. We can talk about tribe brands in general. And all of those have a hero journey. So it's really how do you communicate your story and what part of your story needs to be communicated. And then it's say it well, say it often, right? So the human brain loves stories. And it's also that neural coupling, right? When I tell a story and somebody is listening, then there's this brain entrainment, this neural coupling that's happening. And there's just a lot of power that happens with that. The first one being just attention. We're definitely in an attention economy. And so the first thing you need to do is get attention. Stories are good for that. But it's also building the credibility. They're like, okay, clearly you've been through the same shitstorm I have. You're just on the other side of it, right? Like when Funk talks about him being 39 and like pretty fat and like libido's gone and all of these things, and versus how he is now in his 50s, right? People can see that, can see who he is now, see the story and like put themselves into those shoes. And so everybody has like a series of how their hero journey could go. It's really just about defining, but this part depends on every other piece, right? So we'll kind of circle back, and every piece affects the rest. But the them, we'll just say you in this, right? And how it overlaps is that there should be a certain amount of people that have this. Who was I 5 years ago, right? Like when I'm talking to specifically on the marketing side, we'll just talk to the 27-year-old marketer who was just desperate for a system, desperate for certainty, desperate to take the foot off the brake so that they could attract clients and actually fulfill on it in a fast amount of time and create more leverage and just create that flywheel, right? So I can speak directly to all of the pain points of like, spending all day on a computer but feeling you've got nothing done, and being busy but like there's no money, like it makes no sense working on these projects but that just don't pay. And so it's really looking at your hero journey and how it references who you're speaking to. And the more clear you can be, or I guess the more real you can be with it. A lot of people spend so much time just like thinking about it. And the best thing to do is just talk to your people, find your people, talk to your people, and then start to hear from their words what they say, right? So this part should be easy. In 90 Day Tribe, we go through like all of these become a module. Like this right here is mod 3 because it has to be so tight before you can move on to the next pieces. So there's a lot of frameworks that help you cross-reference everything, right? Like sending surveys to your list and what do you say in that to extract the right data? How do you cross-reference that with online tools to see what people are searching, where are they hanging out, right? Just to make sure that what you have is accurate is key. But a lot of it is that you should be this person, right? If it's just like a me brand and you're just trying to hustle some products, fine. But if you're trying to create a tribe brand, like a collective overview of who we are together, then it's just about communicating, well, who are we? And what are we doing? And what's happening, right? And so like it should be that specific. And then we'll talk about this right now. Third part right here, this I got awful highlighted section. This is the philosophy. So this part probably took us longer than everything else just because it's not really talked about. But this is the overlap between you and them, right? And so just because you have overlapping pains and problems doesn't mean that you're the person that they want to automatically trust and connect with and like be their guru. Just because maybe 100 years ago, there was very few people who overcame this thing and had a method to help people. But these days, you can't, as soon as you start scrolling like diabetes cure, I mean, you're going to be hit up with 100 books, 17 different coaches, 7 different Facebook ads, YouTube ads. Like they're going to follow you around the internet, and there's so many people that you could turn to. So in a sea of sameness, the differentiator is this part right here, this overlap between you and them. And that is philosophy, right? I guess a little bit of personality, but it really comes down to what do we believe? And so it's kind of 2 parts. Like there should be misconceptions in the marketplace. Like, oh, I used to think what carbs were the enemy, fat was the enemy, right? Like things like that, until you realize like, well, no, it's, slow carbs versus, and then like how fat is, okay, Clemmy's, she's wrapped completely around my headphones. Oh no. Okay. That's, so anyways, the philosophy is like, what do we believe? And that's what I find is the kind of most easier triggering part of marketing, is that the more prolific you can be in the what do we believe, the easier it's going to be to find people, and definitely the more trolls you're going to get in the meantime. But I like to think about Liver King, right? He blew up really fast. He made a huge splash on the internet, and he had a very specific belief system. He had 10 of his tenets that he lived by. Is like, this is who we are, right? This is what we do. And then he had certain belief systems, like you have to eat cow testicles, and you got to eat beef liver, and you got to eat it raw, and you got to eat it for breakfast, and cut out all these things and lift heavy weights. And he was very big on, this is how men should be, or like humans should be. This is like the story behind it. He was very specific with what he believed, and then how that translates into the next part, this circle over here, how this belief system led to, we're going to call this the promised land. I'm going to spend more time writing. So the promised land is 2 parts. The main part is what everyone talks about, and that is you have to have a very clean, specific result that people can see and point at, and more importantly, like something that's existing on their to-do list, something that exists in their brain, something that gets triggered every day that drives them crazy that they need to get rid of, right? So like with Funk, the achievement is the alpha zone, get them in the alpha zone, but we need to articulate what that means for them in a way that they can see exactly when they hit it. And that's what most people are missing, is they have very fluffy results, and it's very hard to tangibilize that. It's like, I want more clients. Okay, right? But what does that look like? And so it's like, well, I don't want to stress about rent. And so that's a little bit more specific, but the achievement needs to be something that they can like point at. So when I think about like Funk and fitness in general, then it's all the triggers in the day, right? Like they're opening their fridge and they're not sure what to eat, or they're not sure how to cook it, or they're not sure what to avoid. They look in the mirror and they're so frustrated with that belly fat just sitting there. Like they're putting their pants on and they're frustrated with the belt buckles and like how big that is. They're bending over to tie their shoes and they're out of breath. They're trying to play with their kids and they can't keep up, right? Like there's very specific things that will trigger that then help you define what the promise is, what the achievement is, what the result is. And so the more clean and clear you can be with that, and that can also be chunked down into like different pieces, right? Achieve this, and then we get to that next level where we achieve this, right? Like there could be this, used to call it 4-minute mile, like what is the impossible thing we're trying to break together? And then chunk it down into like, well, where do we have to start? And so getting really clear on the promised land, the first part is achievement, but a big part of achievement is they're hiring you because they don't know how to be this person. They don't know how to get that result, or else they would already have it, right? And so what we have to do is this second piece right here, and that is define a new identity, right? Like who do they become in the process? And so when we define the alpha zone, it's because we had the identity of an over 40 alpha. That's the first thing we start with when we work with brands. And so it has to be identity based, because as we found out, identity is what controls behavior. And the whole thing is because if people sign up, that's great, you get paid. But a lot more people, like basically not a lot of people actually create happy customers enough to sustain a brand, let alone like a tribe brand, right? And so happy customers is our huge metric, because conversion, it's like 3% success rate on courses right now, meaning like 96.7% of people who buy products and services on the internet don't do anything with it. They don't complete it. They don't get the result. And if you don't get the result, then you don't get the marketable proof that you can use on the front end on your sales pages and your marketing. And so then it's harder to trust you. You don't have the people who are referring. Why would they refer if they didn't get the result? You don't have the people posting because they stopped engaging, right? You get that last login and they stop showing up. Well, then they're not going to engage in the community. They're not going to engage in the product. Then they're gone, right? And so we have to make behavior like ingratiated in them. And so to get them this achievement, right, to get them to the alpha zone, we have to make them an over 40 alpha. And so just like with us, it's like to create a tribe brand and to like lead your people, it's like, well, you have to become a tribe leader. And so that was a big part of what took us so long to get here, is that like, were we ready to be a tribe leader? Like in terms, and like, what does that even mean? And what do we need to believe? And what do we need to do each day to do that, right? Because we know once you've defined that, once you define the rituals and the behaviors of the identity, well, then it's, I mean, with enough consistency, it'd be impossible not to get to the promised land and get the achievement. So this is the new identity, is really defining who do your people become, right? This is the status. People will pay more for status than for money, right? And so everything we do is an identity shift, which brings us to the last piece, is how it all connects. This whole thing is about identity shifting. And so how we do that is through our, I'm just going to write method, but through our methodology, right? And so this is what pretty much every coach has. This is, I mean, this is what we spent 7 years trying to build and got to the point where we now have the tribe method. But this is your method, right? So most people already have this. It's just not very leveraged. It's usually very one-on-one, not very incentivizing. Not a lot of people get results. You usually lose retention at about month 3. And so the method is what connects it all, right? The method is how we are going to identity shift to get them to the result. And so we like to break it down into, we talked about this last week, but into the 3s, right? Rule of 3s. People remember 3s really quickly, really easily. It's just easy for the brain. And so if you can chunk your method into 3 parts or 3 content pillars, right? Or 3 journeys, like Funk has 3 one-year journeys of the over 40 alpha to get them into the alpha zone. But within year 1, you should be there. And year 1 is broken down into 12 different, almost like challenges, right? And so we have all of these micro wins to get to the big win, which helps our retention. And so it's really taking your method and trying to make it an experience. Like, we are not in the information age anymore. Ever since Google came in, AI came in, anything information-based, you can find in a minute. You can find in 10 seconds. And so we are in the experience age. People will pay for experiences. And because we're so lonely, all we want to do is experience things with like-minded people. So if you can rally your people into a tribe brand, into a tribe mission, if you can turn your coaching into an experience that like-minded people get to do together, get to rally together, and like make it feel like they're a part of something bigger, then you get meaning, you get belonging, you get engagement, you get that brotherhood effect, basically, is what I talked about in the promo for this, is that you get that engagement, you get those people meeting up, you get those people like seeing each other all the time to the point where they build so much familiarity that this becomes, you know, a place of belonging, a place they can take their shoes off. And that's why we named our company Barefoot Brands. But yeah, so you can see how every piece ties in with the rest, right? So if you change who you're targeting, right? If I start targeting just moms, well, that's going to change my story completely, right? Which is going to change my result probably a little bit, which is definitely going to change the identity name and probably will change the method, right? If I change the identity, if I change the result, I could have a result for a different niche in my list, right? Funk now has 5 tribe brands within his fitness company because he just changes the result, which changes the story a bit, right? His band academy is a different story than his certification, which is a different story than the over 40 alpha, which is a different story than the kettlebell Spartan academy, which all target different people with different problems, but still an overlap of who he was because he's got so many different parts to his story. And they all have a different method to get there with a different identity and a different result. And so you can see how every piece ties so perfectly into each other. And you can see and you can feel when it's tight and it makes sense. And so this is foundationally what we do with every brand. This is modules 3 through 5 in 90 Day Tribe with all of the exercise sheets and all of the frameworks to make sure that everything is nailed tight, 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 so that communication becomes easy, right? Because then you have clarity. Like it's easy to create content, it's easy to create products, it's easy to create the engagement and like build this thing up. And then it's just about inviting people in and leading your people, right? That's why we say no bad days. No bad days when you're just leading your tribe. You're just hanging out with your people. And so that's what we're doing with Jay Ferrugia. We launch next week just because he's like, I don't want to do high ticket one-on-one anymore. I just want to hang out with my guys. You know, he had a renegade gym in Jersey that was like pretty famous back in the 90s, early 2000s. He's like, I just want to get back to that energy, but online. And then I can just choose which people, like maybe 10 or 12 of my favorite people to work one-on-one with. And so many people are trying to get to this model where all they have to do is just hang out with their people, grow with their people, lead their people, and create some leverage, create transformations at scale. But it all starts with creating the messaging. Because if this isn't tight, everything else will fail, right? If things are off, the brain always can tell if something is off, if it doesn't really look right or it doesn't smell right, doesn't feel right, something's off. Or if it's confusing, which a lot of sales pages are, is like, well, what do I really get? What are we really doing? Like it's pretty unclear. And the confused mind doesn't buy. So you definitely want to nail this tight first. And this is the Tribe brand identity framework. And so really think about who is your story and how does it overlap with your people? What is your philosophy? What do you believe about your business, about the industry, about the market, about yourself, right? Where are we going together? What do we achieve? How do we point at that? How do I know exactly when I've achieved it? Who do I become? How do we like who is that? What does that person believe? What does that person do? What is the character traits of that? And then of course, how do we get there? What is the method? What is the name of this thing? And how to dissect it into a way that makes people want to continue each day with the behavior so that they get to the promised land. And then, of course, you can just keep repeating this with different levels of hierarchy. And then the tribe just keeps growing. There's more status, there's more hierarchy between it. And then there's like this longevity of an experience. Then you can have camps, you can have masterminds, you can have inner circles, right? And so you can just keep building this thing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you want to see exactly what we did, then after we turned Funk's membership from $0 to 3 million, we got the 2 Comic Club award. Then we wrote the playbook of exactly what 27 psychological strategies that we did to make that happen, right? To get the tattooed members, the longevity, the retention, and ultimately the millions of dollars. We found 27 psychological strategies. The first 11 are going to be more about the messaging. Once that's tight, the next 6 are about creating high retention assets on the internet. And the last 10 is about the community and how to rally your people together to create that brotherhood effect. So if you want to get that, just go to tribemethod.com. It's like a double case study, right? We wrote exactly what we did. And then Funk looked at exactly how it was implemented into his business. So you have both. You have a real world example as we tell you exactly what and why it works. So if you want to get that, it's just $7.95 at tribemethod.com. Let's go.